What is up, guys? In this video I'll be installing these new Dynamic Autowerx Flowmax turbos from Bimmer Network. I'll put a link in the description below for an affiliate link where you can get a discount on these turbos. These are, in my opinion, the best in the business when it comes to better twin turbos. They're not stock cores at all. They don't require your old cores. They're completely new castings, different manifolds altogether. I have the normal Flowmaxes. However, you can also buy the Flowmax Plus if you want a even better turbo for an even more boost. But for my power levels, I wasn't very concerned with that. Please be aware this is not a full DIY. This is more of a just informational video on how I install my turbos and the kind of the overview of the entire process. If you would like a proper DIY, I'll put one in the description below to a very good one, but mine's more of an informational sort of overview of my entire process. I did have some issues with my relocated inlets, which made things quite complicated and which kind of slowed me down. Overall, this took me a lot longer than it should have, just due to random complications. But yeah, I enjoyed the video. Hopefully it helps you out with your own installation and gives you some insight if you're using Dynamic Autowerx turbos as well. It's a sad day. It is a sad day indeed. Turbo 2 has just failed. White smoke galore. This is very embarrassing. It is what it is. Just gotta make it home and go from there. Alrighty guys, the time has finally come to start working 3 Series and get those new turbos installed. First thing we gotta do is obviously remove the old turbos, which means we gotta drop the subframe. Before that, we gotta take the coolant tank out, we gotta take the vacuum canisters out, and a bunch of other stuff as well. In this video, I'll also be installing relocated inlets, which are 2 inches to fit the new turbos, which means the coolant tank will actually be going on that side now, instead with the vacuum canisters, and the inlets will be right over here, and we have to take the old inlets out. So to do that will be a bit complicated, but first things first, gotta remove all the old stuff first, and then we can go ahead and start putting new stuff on. I have drained out the coolant expansion tank by kind of using a fluid transfer pump into a bucket, so this is basically empty at this point. Unfortunately, my coolant level stick actually just broke off, which is kind of annoying, but we should still be okay to use without it. I'll get a new one later on, but let's remove the 10mm screws all the way around the coolant expansion tank, as well as remove this hose, and the tank should just pop right out. So the coolant expansion tank is now popped out. I've taken those 2 screws out, put them a little back in so we know where they go. Before we remove the bottom hose of the expansion tank, I'm going to take the vacuum canisters out as they're kind of blocking access to that bottom hose. So taking these guys out will make it a lot easier. Also 10mm screws, kind of hard to get to the ones below, but if you use an extension like this, you should be okay to get them. There's also one up top as well. Alright, to get all those guys loose, pull this up. Take the lines off, top and bottom. Nice. Now we have access to the bottom coolant line, which we need to release the clip at the very top of it. If you guys have ever worked with these lines before, this will be nothing new. Gotta release the clip. Oh god. Yep, that can happen sometimes. Coolant spillage, how I hate you. Next, up through the maze of vacuum lines over here, remove both of your boost solenoids. You got one up front over here and one just back there. They both have 2 10mm nuts on them. They look just like this. Not the easiest to remove, but I was using a 1/4 inch ratchet with a long extended 10mm bit. Seemed to work pretty well. It is kind of hard to get to though, but without the coolant tank in the way, it is much, much easier. So once those are out of the way, kind of get them out of the way like this and kind of put them on top for now. You could remove some vacuum lines, but it may make things a little bit more annoying when putting things back together. Although I do know this one line over here that kind of goes all the way down in the engine bay goes up to your turbo. So you could easily remove that and find where that goes fairly easily without much of a hassle. So I might do that just for a little bit more wiggle room. But other than that, I'm going to keep going, get this one off as well. Then we take this heat shield off the top and maybe even get some of the turbo manifold studs or nuts loose. The next step is to remove this little metal plate, little heat shield that was below the boost solenoids. A bunch of E8s along the bottom of the of this row over here. There should be about 4, I want to say, 4 E8s. One over here, one there, one for the down, one at the very back. A little hard to get to, but with a 1/4 inch drive ratchet and a bit like this, you should be good to go. Pretty loose too, so once you kind of get the initial torque off, it kind of comes off by hand. So let's get that out real quick. Just got one left. which I have to do by hand. And then this sucker will come right out. Something else to start doing right now is also removing the actual nuts to the manifolds for your turbos, and they look like this. There are actually 4 per turbo, so 8 in total. They look just like this, and they can be susceptible to stripping. As you can see, with the T50 Torx, it's not really pretty, is it? So, and that was me not doing very much force either. So the initial torque to break them off is pretty high, but then once you get it loose, it kind of just comes right off like butter, so not a huge deal. But I did have one instance where it actually pulled the stud out with it. Now, no big deal because it's going to bring the stud out anyway. We're going to take the studs out anyways to replace all the studs and new nuts, of course, because this one was actually the worst one, probably kind of stripped partially, but luckily there's plenty of meat on here that the bit can grab onto. But definitely buy new hardware. This is not stuff you want to reuse. This is old, it's worn out, been through many heat cycles. Just do yourself a favor and buy yourself new hardware, new studs, and new nuts. Also, one more note, of the 8 nuts there are, I only removed 4 completely. I left 2 on per turbo, the 2 outer ones, so they can still hang in place, but they're all broken loose. Just the middle ones I actually removed fully. While we're up here, other things we can do are loosen the outlet for the front turbo. You can see I've already loosened mine. It's a T30 Torx, kind of awkward to get to, but if you use something like this, a little flexible joint and the T30 over there, it can make it happen pretty easily. A little bit annoying to get to still, but it still comes off without too much of a problem. Pretty loose on there, to be honest, which is kind of surprising. So that guy's loosened up now. The rear outlet is just kind of too far in there. We'll probably do that from below the car instead. Something else we can do is also remove the 13mm bolt for the rear V-band clamp right down there. Pretty easily accessible right now, so might as well do it. The front V-band is kind of better from below the car anyway, so we'll wait till the subframe is off to do that. With all the intake stuff removed that I can remove so far, we can now move below to the car and start doing suspension work and removing stuff like the sway bar, which I've actually already removed. I'll show you guys real quick how to do that. Simply you disconnect the end link, which is over here right now. It's going to be either a 16 or a 17 or an 18 on either side. And there's an inside part you can kind of grab with the wrench. And then of course the nut on the outside. Now it kind of depends, you know, which end links you have. I have mildly HD ones, so those are not the stock ones. A little bit different sizing from the factory ones. I can't remember what those are, but should be one of those I just mentioned. Once those are off, remove the 13mm nuts at the very end of studs on the bushings. They actually are, you can kind of see, this is where the sway bar bushings end up. These are the nuts for those bushings. Once they're out, the kind of bar just drops, and you can twist it over the tie rods or the control arms. I can't remember which ones. I think it was the control arms, actually. You twist it over those, and the whole bar drops out of the way, like so. After that, we have to remove all the control arms from the subframe. So if you've ever installed any of these M3 lower control arms, you know how much of a pain they are. Just getting it to fit in this slot is almost impossible. I really didn't want to take it out again and have to fiddle with it, putting it back in, you know, later on already get the turbos in and all that stuff. So what I'm going to do instead is remove it from this end on the knuckle, much easier, 21mm up here. But I have to remove this 18mm bolt temporarily to remove my control arm brace, which is over here. This is aftermarket, not stock, so your car probably doesn't have this. Pretty ugly, but it does the job pretty well. So I took that guy out, but this is going to be loose for now. I'll remove the 20mm off the knuckle. But the rest of the bolts are pretty easy. The tie rods take off of the knuckle as well. 18 or 20mm being up here. Comes with an impact very nicely. Unfortunately, you can't really get a good grasp of an impact on this one, so you have to use it with a wrench, or if you have some sort of smaller power tool that might work, you can use that as well. I'll be using a wrench or breaker bar and then use a Torx T30 or T35 to hold this middle part in place. This upper control arm comes out very easily. Just stick an impact up in here and then it comes right off with an 18mm. Just for reference, all of the bolts, subframe included, subframe bolts and control arm bolts on the actual car are 18mm, and then the ones on the knuckle are going to be usually 21mm. So those all come off pretty easily. And then once they're off, you can kind of push it to the side. You can see on that side of the car, I've just got control arms hanging everywhere. It looks very odd, but that is what you have to do. Here's what it looks like with all of your control arms off the car and kind of disassembled. We have this one up here, this one over there, the tie rod and then we have the lower control arm kind of hanging down over there. The whole thing kind of rests in this side, which is pretty nice. Yeah, gonna move on with it. We probably need an alignment after this, which, you know, no big deal. Consider dropping an entire subframe. Not to worry about that. And then to remove this central black brace, and then to remove the central subframe brace over here, there are 6 16mm bolts. There are 2 over here, 2 at the very back, and also 2 kind of in this really weird middle section over here. They'll come out, the entire thing will drop down. Just be careful of your head, that's all. It is finally time to lower our steering rack. We've got the steering rack over here, E12 over there, and then we have a 60mm nut on top. Just use a nice wrench to kind of fit in over there. It's kind of hard to get to, but you'll figure it out. The E12 is also very easy to come out, and then these are actually one-time use aluminum bolts. Now, I just kind of bought these about a year ago, so I'm not too concerned about that. Might use some Loctite when I put these back in, but if yours are old and original, replace them. I'm gonna pull the steering rack towards us, lower a little bit. I'm gonna put a little jack stand over here to support it, so it's not completely hanging. And then once the steering rack is dropped, the subframe is basically ready to come out. We just need to get an engine brace up top to hold the engine up top, and then we can lower the subframe very slowly and also loosen up some bolts that are holding on this coolant pipe over here. Yo, subframe check.
Look, it's out there.
Oh, what? It's over there? Wait, what's down here then? Oh, that's right, nothing. Yeah. Alrighty guys, just got the subframe off the car, but I'll walk you through how to do it real quick. So here's the engine support bar. For the N54, you take your tow hook and you actually screw it in right up top over here. Got it secured to both sides of the car over here, and then of course just tighten it as much as I could. Lift a little bit as well, but not too much, just so it's not dangling in the air when you take the subframe off. The subframe itself only has 6 bolts. In fact, I'll show you guys real quick. They are all 18mm. We have one over here in the front over there. We've got one in the middle. It's actually very long over there. And one in the very back. But once those 3 are off on either side, it kind of drops really low. The 2 things you got to watch out for are the steering rack, which I have kind of resting on the jack stand right now, and also this guy over here, which has 3 T30 screws that go through this coolant line and then go all the way to the subframe itself. This 2 over there as well. Kind of annoying to reach, so when you lower the subframe a bit, you can get a better access to those. Other things you're going to want to watch are your headlight level sensor, which connects to the lower control arm. You can see this little 10mm was hooked through the control arm itself, so I had to take that off and make sure this wire wasn't damaged with the subframe as I took it out. You can also unclip it, but this clip is very stubborn, so I chose not to remove it. It's kind of just hanging here. I'll probably put it away. Also, the engine mount bolts are actually just these E12s over here. There are 4 of them. They come out very, very easily. Almost too easily. It's kind of concerning, but they come out, and the engine mounts are still attached to the engine over here. I did this way so I can take them out later and then put new ones that I already have. It might just be easier this way, I figured. But those come off also very easily, so not a big deal. When taking the actual subframe out, we had to sort of lower it and also at the same time push it to the right. What I did is I pushed it through, or pushed the steering rack through a slot in the subframe to get it through. And then once it was through this side, I could push through that side as well. And then the subframe was basically all the way out. It is a bit cumbersome, especially on the floor like this, but you can make it work. Oh yeah, we got a good clear look at the side of the engine with the subframe out of the way. Kind of cool to see. But we can get the V-bands off. We couldn't get off before. Just loosen that guy. It's still kind of on there, but we can use a flat screwdriver to tighten it up or loosen it later on. The O2 sensors are here. I'm not going to remove the downpipes, but instead I'll disconnect them from the electrical connectors. So down here, the post-cat ones, which no cats, but the post-cat sensors, disconnect right down here. And the pre-cat ones are actually up top. I'll show you guys in a second. But once those are all off, and you've removed all the 13mm down here that go the rest exhaust, the downpipes can come off and out of the way, but I'll show you the top ones first. So 2 wires just like this. One has a gray sleeve, one has a black sleeve. They usually connect over here in these little cradles to the respective colors. Over here is the gray one, here's the black one. I put a zip tie, a blue one to kind of remind me which one is which. But they both connect up here. Disconnect them and then kind of bring them all the way down around the back of the engine. Kind of hard with all these wires in the way, but you can. And kind of push them down to where the exhaust is, and you can easily pull them out below the car. Alrighty guys, just got the downpipes off. Taking a look at the turbos. This one is actually okay. A bit, dirty, but it's to be expected. This is the one that blew up though. See the oil everywhere. That turbine does not stay in place, likes to move around a lot, so that was making that terrible sound before. So we know the culprit now, but here's the downpipes over here. You can see this one is, it's kind of hard to tell, but it's very oily inside of there, so I need to clean it out, and also get new O2 sensors for this side. Should probably get new O2 sensors for both, but they're kind of expensive, so we'll see. I probably should though anyways. Looks like the oil pan gasket was weeping here, or was it from up top? I can't quite tell. It's above the oil pan, so kind of weird, but I'll figure that out later. But time to take this guy off to get the actual mount off, which this guy's toast, which I have new mounts to replace in anyways. Can take this off and then also deal with the turbo inlets in a second. These things are not in good shape. They're also very, very skinny from factory, so having those new inlets from VRSF, the aluminum ones, should be pretty nice. And then, of course, the turbos can come off. But before we do that, let's take off the water pump and thermostat. They're kind of in the way right now. I also have a new hose to replace this guy over here. Gonna change out your water pump thermostat if you haven't done it in a while. Mine's only like a year old, so I'm not gonna bother changing them, but I will take them out obviously right now to get access to the turbo. But first, let's take this hose off. Gonna be a lot of fluid that comes out, so I'll get the bucket ready to catch all the fluid, and then we can take those components out. Just got the water pump and thermostat off. Bunch of coolant hoses over here that go into both of them. You'll just need to take all of them off basically. And then also the electrical connector for the water pump is right over there. Thermostat's right over there. There are two, I want to say E12s or E14s that are connected to the block over there. In fact, they're right over there. Then two 10mm that connect the water pump to the thermostat. We can also now remove the second outlet V-band clamp over here, which I've already done. It's all loose now. I also loosened up the one on top. In fact, now it just connects to the intercooler, and we can actually pull the entire thing out. If you loosen up the clamp that connects it to the intercooler over there. Mine's pretty loose already. Just needs to get some force from up top, and it should be able to come right out. All right, now that the outlet pipe is out of the way, we can take the coolant pipe out of the way, which is this one major pipe over here. Took it off the, I want to say the water pump earlier, and we can take it off of the block as well. There are 4 E8s on this thing, also 2 T30s for the 2 turbo lines. Loosen all of these up, get the turbo lines off first, and then the main pipe off at the end. Already guys got the coolant lines off over here. The main one that's already off, it's actually over there somewhere, and these 2 smaller ones as well. Not gonna work on the oil drain lines, which I actually have taken off already. Just the T30s up there, and this kind of unclips with an O-ring. I'm gonna replace all of these lines, the coolant feed and drain, as along with the oil feed and drain, but you can actually reuse these, just put new O-rings, but I would just change them out while you're here, because, you know, they're old, and why not, right? So, that one's over there, and then so is this one over here. There's not much oil coming out of these, because I've already drained all the oil in the car, from the drain plug, of course, so not gonna be too much leakage there. But if you haven't drained your oil yet, which I think you should do before this, to be honest, it'll leak a lot out of here, so I would just take care of that. Also, you can see my blown turbo is just leaking oil out of the top over here, and it's not looking very good, so yeah. Next up, we remove this bracket on either turbo. On this one, it's over here, nice and easy access. And then that one, it's kind of a bit harder to get to, so I'm not quite sure I'm going to do that yet, but we'll cross the bridge when we get there. But for this one, at least, you just take off the one screw back here. I believe it's a T30. I'll tell you guys in a sec just to make sure. And then take that out, and then both these lines can kind of pop right out. And then I believe one is, I think they're both coolant related actually. Coolant feed and drain, so those should be pretty easy to take out. And then the same will be over there, just like I said, kind of weird positioning, so it'll be interesting. Alrighty guys, so at this point all the drain lines are off. So the oil drain lines we had down here, from here to the bottom over here, and also from there to the bottom over there, those are off. And the coolant drain lines, which actually went from the bottom over there, and also they kind of went a little bit toward over here to the middle of it as well. Same on that side, those are both off as well. And the coolant feed lines, they're off on the turbo side, so you can see one's dangling over there, the other one's over here, but it's kind of tight to get them from the back on the block side, so we'll wait till the turbos are off the car to take those off. Also, the oil feed lines are basically impossible to get to on the turbo side when they're on the car, so we're going to remove them from the block side instead, which is over here. We're going to take this guy out and then take both turbos off together, as well as remove all the remaining T50s on the manifold nuts. This oil feed on the block side is actually a T45, just so you guys know, not the traditional T30. Well guys, the time has come to get the turbos all the way out of the car. I've gotten all of the exhaust manifold studs, or not studs, the nuts off, except for the 2 in the top corners over there. Once those come off, the turbos can now come off. I took off the little heat shields that were kind of annoying right behind the turbos. They're kind of hidden E8s kind of all the way around them, so you can access all of them from the front over here. I was taking a long extension through kind of one of these areas, but you really have to like maneuver the turbo around and maybe loosen all the exhaust nuts first. You can kind of see where those things are. It's kind of hard to see them even with this camera where they would go, but they are there and you can access all of them. It's kind of a pain, so just be wary of that. Once those are all out though, I mean, you can see this thing is very loose once it's come out. We'll have to take both turbos out at the same time because this one oil feed line is what's keeping them together. So I'm gonna go ahead and take those out right now, and then that is essentially it for turbo removal. We have to take all the inlets out as well, because I'll be changing out these terrible, crappy plastic inlets for some VRSF aluminum ones. And yeah, that'll be the next step, and then also cleaning up everything as well, and then reorganizing ourselves and preparing ourselves for reinstallation. Well, here are the turbos right over here off the car now. Not super heavy, believe it or not, so, but you should prepare yourself for a good amount of weight. Just make sure you have a good grasp on them. We're gonna take off the oil feed lines, some T30s of course, and the lines will come right off. This is the blown one, and it actually doesn't look too bad. But I mean, of course, can't help the shaft play, which you can kind of see there. I'm assuming that's what kind of gave out, and then of course that hit the oil seal, and then of course we're blowing smoke and not making boosts, so that'll do it. This side was fine, but they're just so small compared to the Dynamic Autowerx Flomax I just got. These things look tiny, but they'll make for some good desk ornaments, so that's pretty cool. But these suckers lasted me about 114,000 miles, and I think about 30,000 miles of those 114,000 was under 20 pounds of boost, and a good 50,000 of that was while the car's been tuned. So pretty sweet. I think it's lasted a pretty long time for these N54 turbos, so I'm not disappointed at all. But I'm looking forward to installing the new Dynamic Autowerx Flomaxes, courtesy of Number One Performance. Gonna be sick, but now let's reorganize the workspace, get some old stuff out of the way, and prepare for installation of the new turbos. Once the turbos are off the car, you want to remove your exhaust studs. These are East Torque 6. They're very brittle, so be careful not to break these. I would recommend using PB Blaster before taking these off. But once you soak them in PB Blaster for about 10 minutes, I would say, the Torx E6, you'll be able to get these out no problem. I did snap one of them, but I was lucky enough to use the stud extractor, and it got it out without a problem at all. Basically digs into the stud, clamps down on it, and it just pulls it right out. There's also enough stud it could actually bite on, because only the very tip with the Torx E6 bit just kind of broke off kind of randomly. So of course there's the last one too. All the other ones came out just fine, just this last one had an issue. So here are all the new studs. I'm gonna put them in now and torque them down to 89 inch-pounds. Not very much torque at all, but it is enough. It's all these things need. Important note here, so the Dynamic Autowerx turbo manifolds are actually a little bit thicker than the stock manifolds. So once you tighten them down, the exhaust studs rather, you actually have to back them out about 3 turns for them to fully clear the manifolds. You're not gonna have any issues because of this, but you still have to do it to make sure you get proper fitment with the exhaust manifold nuts. In the meantime, I'll clean up the block so far as much as I can. It's kind of dirty up there from the old gaskets from the old turbos, but I can only get it off. I think maybe a screwdriver can scrape some of it off, but for the most part it's all flat, so I'm not too worried about it. I've also changed my oil pan gasket. It's a good time to do so because your Subframe's already off the car, so you might as well if it's leaking a little bit. That's been changed. Also, I'm going to change my engine mounts right after this, but we need to get those studs back on first, and then we can get the turbos on with some new lines, and we should be good to go, keep moving forward, and put the car back together. To prep the turbos for the car, all I've done is put the oil feed and drain lines on and tighten them up pretty nicely. I put the feed lines back here, as you can see. They kind of meet in the middle eventually when they're all put together. This is going to slide into over there. Then the bigger Torx will go through the middle of both of them, this guy and that guy. And the 2 drain lines over here by 5mm Allens. There, the new gasket as well, which should come in your installation kit, which I have over here. New lines as well, which is pretty good to get because I noticed my old lines are actually kinked. I'll show you guys in a second in comparison, but that means that it wasn't really draining very well, not efficiently. So that is not good for optimal heat dissipation and all that good stuff. So you definitely want to get new lines if your car is relatively old, like mine is, 115,000 miles, and you know, the car is 2009, it's 2021 now, so do the math, you know. Definitely should change those. Compare this old sort of kinked line to that new line right over there. Pretty big difference in terms of size. I noticed the same thing with my feed lines. The feed line over here is pretty bad as well. The new one is not like that at all. They're all pretty new and just untouched, which is kind of what you want if you're doing a big job like this. Other than that, all I've done is also put my donut sort of gaskets on the back over here. You can see they're just sitting over there, ready for the exhaust manifold of the car. On the car side, I have all the new exhaust studs put in over there, as well as the coolant feed lines. Are pretty hard to install with the turbos in, so it's better to put them in beforehand. And then we'll put those inside of the turbos afterwards, and also put the coolant drain lines into that Y pipe on the end as well. Also going to loosely put these heat shields in place. You can probably put 3 of the 4 screws in loosely, 1, 2, and 3. Don't put this last one because the oil feed line will be in the middle over there, which we need to get access to before you can put that screw in, and also that little bracket that goes over here. So we'll need to put just 3 in loosely for both plates before putting the turbos on. I know some people just don't even run these at all, but I don't see why not, because I mean it does prevent heat from getting around in other places you don't want it. So I would still include these. It's just 8 screws, E8 E-Torx, 3 of those on each side, and then you kind of have to maneuver the lines around it. So it'll be kind of annoying, but we can do one turbo at a time because the oil feed line is not yet connected, so we can just do that. It'll be a lot easier than having to put two at the same time. Go ahead and get yourself some of those new exhaust manifold nuts ready to go. You can put 2 on each corner, and then that should be enough to hold it in place, and you can have adjust things as you go. I'm going to do that right now for the rear turbo first, and then we'll do the front turbo right after that.
Many months later.
And about 3 months later, I know this is quite the jump here. We have the turbos in the car now, but it's been quite a while. Unfortunately, I received the incorrect turbo. I'm not sure if I ordered the wrong one or if I was sent the wrong one. Either way, not a big deal because now we have the correct one. Essentially, I got a right-hand drive turbo instead of a left-hand drive rear turbo, so it wouldn't really fit. I was kind of curious why, but you know, it is what it is. Things happen. I'm not going to blame anyone. This could be my fault entirely. I'm not sure. So we're going to go on from there. Correct turbo both sides now. Put the new oil lines on before. I actually put this on the car, so I put the feed line for the coolant on before I put the turbo on as well. I put the oil line, both oil feed and drain on the turbo before putting them on the car, and then I kind of put the rear turbo on first. Got it and kind of buttoned up. You're going to tighten all these little copper nuts to about 15 foot-pounds of torque. And you want to do it about twice because they kind of move around as the donut gaskets sort of shift and kind of fit in place. But once those are in place, so you're all set with that. Then once you have all of that put in place, you can kind of put this heat shield back in. Kind of hard because these turbos are a bit bigger than the stock ones, so you kind of got to wiggle it around there, but it will go in. Also, for the drain lines, for both of them actually, you may find that the drain line does not really want to fit in place properly and the screw won't want to go in. You kind of have to force it, I noticed. I think just because this line is brand new, it doesn't really want to conform to the shape yet, but I think once the car is on, it'll kind of shape itself. But as of now, it is already in place for both of these, but it does take some persuasion to get those in and to get the screw in. Other than that, basically just putting the lines in and slowly making your way back to having a complete turbo setup. So at the moment I have oil, feed, and drain all set up. The two oil lines kind of connected in the middle over here and then over here for the feed. And then as for coolant, the coolant feed lines come from up here. They kind of slide in over there. I haven't put the screw in yet because you need to put the coolant drain lines as well, which will connect to the main pipe that comes off of here. Now keep in mind you want to clean this up as well as you can. This is actually very clean. It's kind of hard to tell. It looks like there's residue, but there's actually not. It's completely flat, so don't worry about that. But do not put these brackets in fully all the way until you have all of your coolant lines in place. So I've also got the coolant feed over here in place, but also not screwed in. I'm gonna get both the coolant drain lines after I get the main coolant pipe in the middle installed. Anyways, here's the coolant pipe over here with a brand new gasket in there. You definitely want to get a new one. I'm not sure if this was taken off before or something like that, but I did notice that there was some like gasket maker on this with an old gasket in place, so I'm not sure if this has been taken off before, which is kind of strange. I've had this car since 68,000 miles, 65,000 miles, 114,000 now, and I've never done that at least on my ownership. And the previous owner was a good friend of ours, and he said the turbos never changed. So, not sure what that was all about, but I'm going to put this back on and then get those screws kind of snugged up, and then we can get the coolant lines, the additional ones, put in place. And then after that, we can tighten up our heat shields, and then we can get our water pump thermostat assemblies back on. And of course, these lines just kind of fit where they do. They kind of go into place naturally. You'll figure it out. If you took it off, you'll have no problem putting it back on. And then we have the fun part of trying to assemble our inlets and outlets. Now, I do have brand new inlets and brand new outlets. They're both VRSF aluminum, so it'll be interesting to see how those will go. I've heard it's going to be kind of a pain, especially the relocated ones, which I've got. But because we have the subframe off the car, this should not be much of a big deal. Some of the annoying parts may be rewiring stuff, but it's okay. We're going to figure it out, and I'm going to walk you guys through that. Sorry I couldn't show you guys exactly how to put the turbos on, but you know, once you get one on, it is very self-explanatory. You basically mimic how the lines work on the old ones, and you just apply to the new ones, and you just put them on. It's as simple as that. One note for Dynamic Autowerx turbos, at least the Flowmax turbos, the manifolds are a bit thicker, so you actually don't want to tighten the studs all the way. So basically, what I would do is tighten them all the way, and then make them snug, and then back them out about 3 or 4 turns, and then you can fully get these properly on these studs, and of course they'll tighten up just fine with the copper nuts on top. So once you get all that stuff done, you're basically all set to keep going and basically put the subframe back on. But of course, like I said, in my scenario, I'll have to be dealing with new inlets and outlets, which will require a bit more work. So hopefully I can get all that done tonight, and then also put the subframe back on tomorrow, and then hopefully we have a functional car by tomorrow. Alrighty guys, I've got the thermostat and water pump fully bolted back up with all the lines fully attached. Now all we have to do, I'm saying all we have to do meaning a lot of stuff, is relocate our cooling expansion tank, because I'm doing relocated inlets. Let's move them over here to around over here actually, and then the power steering reservoir is going to move over here, and then a few things we need to do. We need to disconnect or cut a piece of this line off about 5 to 6 inches from the actual flange, and we're going to put a barb fitting over here that comes with the kit. Then we can run a line all the way over here. We also have to extend the coolant level sensor line. I got to cut some wires over here and just extend them all the way over there. In terms of other extending things, I'm not sure about it yet, but over here you can see there is a line that connected to the PCV fitting. Alrighty guys, so after doing some research, I kind of looked up what this piece was with the part number and such. This was going to the rear inlet before. Get the PCV over here, you can see with my jacked up catch can setup. But essentially all this guy does is he heats up the PCV gases on cold starts to reduce emissions. A little heater element in there, which is why it's this metal piece. And in fact, if you actually unplug this, it actually won't even give you a phantom code. So what we're going to do is just unplug it and forget about it. We're going to put this guy away in a box somewhere, and then we can connect this guy directly to our new inlet, which will be over there. So I'm probably going to remove this entire piece and then just connect a new piece from the catch can that goes all the way to the inlet. Eventually I'm going to change all this. This is kind of a temporary fix. I'm going to get a dual catch can set up with some proper catch cans and fittings. No more of this weird nonsense and just jacked up catch can plumbing. It's been working so far, but obviously it's not going to be ideal, especially when I'm pushing more power with these incorporated turbos. So there's a solution to this. I'm not going to worry about this too much. So once we have the inlets in place, which is not done yet, I'm going to take this guy off and, like I said, run a straight line from there to the inlet. In the meantime, before the inlets go in the car, I'm going to go ahead and remove the coolant expansion tank from over here to over there, which involves first removing the power steering reservoir, so you can put this guy over here. But to get that out of the way, because the lines are in the way, we'll have to remove the charge pipe, which is just, depending on your setup, I have a VRSF all the way, so aluminum charge pipe, aluminum lower charge pipe, and boots and whatever. So I'm gonna remove this 10mm clamp as well as the C-clip over there. Charge pipe will pop off, and we can put the power steering reservoir on one of the new brackets over here. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove that, and then we should be back when I have this removed. As you can see, I've got the power steering reservoir out of position with the two 10mm bolts removed. You can put this aside for now. We can also now remove the power steering reservoir bracket so we can get place for the coolant reservoir. Just got this bracket. I can see there's one 10mm bolt at the top and then two 10mm nuts at the very bottom. They're actually locking nuts. They come out pretty easily though. You can put this aside. We will not be needing this anymore. Just a quick update. This has been very challenging so far. Some guides online to show you how to install these inlets are not quite up there, as there's some random parts that aren't included in this kit or included in some other kits but are not anymore. So to relocate the coolant reservoir, I have this one bracket over here, which is kind of suspicious just having one bracket. Not fully tightened yet, obviously. They include some hardware for this. It's just kind of floating here right now. Nothing connected to it. I might need to cut off this hose over here to move to the expansion tank. This is the main hose that connected to the bottom of the expansion tank before. Essentially what you usually have to cut, they said 5 to 6 inches from the flange. So down there, I know there's not very much lighting, but I'll show you guys in a moment. We'll cut that off, and then we'll have to put that over on the expansion tank and then basically run a hose in between the two barbs. They include, there's a barb over here, there's a right angle one. There's some barbs over here. Well guys, after several hours, I've finally gotten the relocation stuff nailed. Well, I wouldn't say nailed, but I've got it functional. I'm going to tell you guys what I've done and I'm going to walk you guys through what exactly had to be done. Starting off with the power steering reservoir, this one was probably the easiest one to relocate. All I have to do is install this bracket they gave us. There's this two 14mm over here in the alternator. You got to remove those, pop the bracket in, and then of course put the 10mm in that are provided. They're bolts, and you can use the nuts from the car that came with the car, or you can use the nuts that came with the kit. I used ones that came with the kit instead because they're much easier. Put those guys in there, and then you get the power steering reservoir all hooked up. One tip I would have is loosen up this guy first. That kind of retains the power steering reservoir. So loosen that guy up first. We can rotate the reservoir whichever way it has the least tension on the lines. There's still quite a bit of tension right now as it is, so I might need to find a solution for this later on. But for now, this is going to work. It's going to be fine for now. Now moving on to the harder and the most tedious part of this whole job so far, the coolant reservoir. So first off, they give you two brackets. They give you this one over here that kind of mounts to one of the flanges from the power steering, from the coolant tank, and then one that mounts to one of the old connections from before. They also give you another bracket that's supposed to go over here, but I could not for the life of me get it to line up with the actual tank. That bracket is actually over here, and that would mount to the car, I believe, like so, on those 2 points. But I just could not get it to line up at all. Plus, this plate would interfere with my diverter valve, so I said goodbye to that plate. For the lower line, the line that kind of goes from the expansion tank all the way down to the thermostat, essentially all you have to do is you have to cut the flange or the very end of the line off, the part that connects to the actual tank. I'll show you guys that in a second, but you have to connect a 90-degree fitting that goes, and I have mine going up, so that fitting actually connects. You can see down there, there's the fitting to my finger is. It's a 90-degree fitting that's provided in the kit. That connects this line over here with a 1-inch line they provided, which goes all the way along here, not rubbing against any of the belts, luckily. Not really even close, to be honest, so I wasn't too worried about it. That goes all the way, and then to the thermostat line right there. Not the prettiest thing in the world, but it's functional. There are no kinks in this setup. I am a little bit concerned that when I do lower the engine down, if this is going to be pinched, but hopefully not. Worst case, can push down a little bit, and there is more room below the oil cooler lines. But that is a solution for the lower line. It took me a long time to figure that out. The guide kind of suggests to route the line below, but then you run into the belt. And if you orient the fitting any other way, you just have problems. Now, better solutions for this, so I'm told, are getting a 335D coolant tank, which actually lives in this part of the car anyways, naturally from the factory in the 335D. But then you also have to get a 335D charge pipe, which, you know, you're looking at close to $500 at that point. So it's just like, do we make this work temporarily? Do we do this? The other solution I kind of want to do in the future, but it's just very pricey, is for nearly $600 you can buy a proper custom TIG welded aluminum expansion tank that actually fits right over here. You can use it with the stock charge pipe or the aluminum charge pipe that's meant for N54. It fits snugly right over here like an OEM fit. The power steering reservoir can actually stay over here as well. Very clean design, very nice fit by Turner Motorsports, but again, it is $600. So I think I'll do that in the future. I'll see if any problems this one gives me, but that is going to be the end goal for sure. Also, moving on to the wiring, also not very elegant at all, but it's functional. I really hate how this looks, but it is what it is for now. I'm going to wrap this up with some electrical tape, I think, later. But I basically have these butt connectors over here connecting the coolant lines. You can see there's one that's brown and white, one that's brown and black, so I just connected those accordingly. And then you connect these wires that are provided in the kit. Run them all the way, along with some zip ties, all the way around. And they eventually lead to the coolant level sensor, which is right there. Very hard to see, but it's right next to the fender liner. Now, this is the major flaw in this kit, I want to say. So the coolant level sensor has to be twisted in to fit and to basically lock into the reservoir. And when it does that, the actual connector points like that way, right towards the fender liner. Now, unfortunately, you can't really fit that connector in with the fender liner in place. And my car is pretty low, so regardless, it's going to be rubbing the fender liner. So if I did keep it that way, what would happen is, at some point, my car would probably rub at some point in some corner or something like that, or it would get really close. It would vibrate that connector out of place, and I'd lose all my coolant, and then overheat the car, and everything would blow up. I don't want that. So I have it actually point a little bit towards this way, so the sensor's actually not fully locked in at the moment, but I have Gorilla Tape around the edge of it. So that's, as ridiculous as that sounds, that is what other people have been using as well, or duct tape. And it just holds the sensor in place. So while it's not fully locked in, it is sitting in place. If this proves to be an issue, I might just JB weld the thing in place. Again, I didn't want to JB weld this one just yet because I wanted to see if my sensor was damaged after reinstalling and stuff. So I might get a new sensor as well. But that is what I'm doing right now. Again, not the most elegant solution, this whole thing, but it should be working, and it should be working well enough for now. A lot of the stuff is not permanent for me. I don't see on keeping it like this for a while. Also want to change that for aluminum reservoir, but all this stuff may be changing in the near future. It is kind of unfortunate that the VRSF relocation kit is not the most thorough in the world, but it gets the job done, that's for sure. It is just not the cleanest. Also, I did remove the charge pipe for quite a lot of time while I was kind of messing with the reservoir and the power steering reservoir, the coolant tank, I mean. So you need to adjust a lot of stuff there as well. It's a very, very tight fit in here. This may be rubbing against the charge pipe at any given moment, so it is not the best. But hopefully it works, and we're going to find out very soon if it works. Hopefully not in a bad or catastrophic way, but you guys know what I mean. Now it is time for the outlet installation. This could be a bit tricky because we have two parts of the outlets, and also the V-bands are not the easiest to get to. Even with the subframe dropped, we should be okay. So I have the V-band for the front turbo right over here, and this section connects the intercooler. One thing I would like to mention is if your car, like mine, has the engine braced in the air right now and it's not on the subframe, do not tighten the coupler that connects the intercooler to this guy over here, because once the engine settles back on the subframe, there'll be a bit more wiggle room and stuff like that, so it's going to be moving around. You don't want to tear or you don't want to bend one of the boots, the silicone boot that connects to your intercooler. Now, if you're doing all this stuff, you should have an incorporated intercooler, so you won't have the stock fitting, so just keep that in mind. Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and put this on. Mainly going to focus on the V-bands to the turbos. Here's the other section over there. That's for the rear turbo. I'm going to put that on later. And silicone spray is going to be your friend with these couplers. I got some over there, and overall it should be okay. But also, do not forget, these are the O-rings that come with the kit. They fit right in the little recess over there, and those will fit on the turbos to make sure you have a nice seal. Now it is inlet time. Okay, so for the rear turbo over here, we have a little layout of what it's going to look like. There are two elbows. We have a longer one and a shorter one. This is the shorter elbow. That is the longer elbow. You can kind of see how that looks. The shorter elbow is going to go on the rear turbo with a larger clamp. There are two larger clamps, and the rest are pretty small clamps instead. There's a pretty visual difference when you have them all laid out next to each other. The two larger clamps will go on the turbos themselves, and the rest will go on every other connection, essentially. So this clamp will go over here. These two go on this little elbow over here, and then this one will go over here. And then, of course, your cone filters will go on the very top of these two little inlet pipes, and also the PCV will connect to right over here just by a hose clamp, and that's about it. As for installation, you're going to put the rear one on first. By doing so, put the rear elbow on first with the clamp, and then put the other piece and then slowly build it up towards almost done. And unfortunately, guys, this is part of the video where I kind of stopped recording as I faced a lot of random issues and complications with the new parts. Stuff wasn't fitting well, I had random coolant leaks and things weren't going very well, so I had to redo a lot of stuff. But I got it all figured out. Like I said in the beginning, I'll be putting links in the description below about videos you can watch for more comprehensive DIYs. My Vehicular DIY has a great one for turbo installation. I just kind of listed the quirks of the Dynamic Autowerx turbos in mine. My biggest issue with my install was definitely the VRSF products with relocated inlets and outlets, so if you can avoid VRSF, I would definitely do that. But thankfully, after dealing with all the leaks and the issues with the inlets, I was able to reinstall the subframe and get all the stuff topped up, new oil, new coolant, all the good stuff. I'm currently running a 2.5 inch diameter exhaust, which is crucial for the bigger turbos. It is recommended by Dynamic Autowerx, as well as a custom tune by Wedge Performance, and the car's been running great for the last 2,000 to 3,000 miles almost now, and I've had no issues. I drove the car pretty normally for the first 1,000 miles, didn't go too hard on anything. I had to get data logs for the tune and stuff, and right now I'm running about 19 PSI on them, which is pretty conservative, of course, but the car feels fantastic, so much faster than before. I don't have any numbers, of course, but that's just a conservative tune on my stage 2 low pressure fuel pump and stock high pressure fuel pump. Should also mention I switched to a Group 5 oil, so I'm using Motul 300V, which is their Group 5 oil, 5WD-40 of course. Dynamic Autowerx recommends to use the Group 5 oil, which is why it's very important to do so. Higher ester concentrations and whatnot, also to change it every 3,000 miles, so that's also important. Moment of truth, people. Let's get this ready. Okay. Oh.
Dynamic Autowerx turbos. Sama upgraded the turbos on the 335. He's owned this car for a very long time. We've done a lot of work on it. It used to be an auto, and it does this now.
Well guys, that wraps up this behemoth of a video. Definitely not as organized as I would have liked it to be, but you know, things don't always go as planned, especially when you're doing these massive projects on these cars. Definitely was a lot to organize, especially considering this thing was, you know, drawn out over a few months, and I was lacking parts and all sorts of complications. But it's done now. Definitely going to make a lot more content with these turbos in this car, so stay tuned for those. Please let me know what you'd like to see with these turbos. I can do whatever you guys kind of want as long as it's you know, somewhat legal and accessible. Yeah, stay tuned for more content like this. Consider leaving a like on this video if it helped you out, and maybe even subscribe if you want to see more content with these Dynamic Autowerx turbos. With that being said, peace out guys, and I'll see you in the next one.